I'm also in team building. Like yesterday, we had a wonderful, me and Osea had a wonderful time in Kitengela. We had Optiven, and we had like 280 people, and you can hear my voice the way it's hoarse, but we really had fun. So let me introduce our speaker guest today. He's called Martin Wafula. Martin Wafula is a specialist in startups. He's also a specialist in organizations that need a fresh breath of air when they are struggling. He has been in very many industries. He has been in publishing. He has been banking. He has been in logistics. Presently, is the general manager of Inland. Welcome, Joan Wanyuike. Inland Container Terminal. He's a very good trainer. So today we are going to extract the experience, the education that he has had, the experience that he has had over 15 years in various managerial positions. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming our good friend Martin Wafula, who has a wealth of knowledge in very many organizations, in very many positions, and in very many industries. Martin, welcome to the discussion as you enlighten us on how to be able to see organizations that are struggling so that we can also prepare ourselves adequately so that we do not face regrets. How are we able to spot those telltale signs that make an organization, an ideal organization that is going to fail, so that we can prepare ourselves for better moves? Welcome, Martin.
Richard, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy to be here today. Just privileged to have been given this opportunity to interact with you guys. I hope you're well. It's a good Saturday. The weather is not as chilly, but then again, that also depends. If you ask the same question to guys who are in Karen, the weather in Karen is very different from other areas. So yeah, but we are happy to be alive today. We live in very interesting times. I've been telling some of my friends we live in very interesting times, and we are all happy to be alive today. With your permission, Richard, just to make sure that the connectivity is stable, I would request to switch off the video.
Okay, all right, it's okay.
Okay. But obviously, once in a while, I'll just switch it on. When I'm not talking, then obviously I'll just do the video on. So Richard has done a good job in terms of introducing myself. I would say I'm a corporate leader. I've been privileged to just be mentored by people to get where I am today. It's one of the things that I don't take for granted. And every time I have an opportunity to speak to professionals, I always remind them one thing: surround yourself with a mentor or a couple of them. They will handhold you to better places. By extension, in terms of introduction, I'm married, I'm a father of two, and a mentor to very many young people. Again, I do this through different forums, visiting schools, just talking to young people, or through religious organizations, because in the positions that we are today, we can only impact the next generation by sharing that knowledge with them. So basically, I do a lot of mentorship, which is just part of my giving back to society in terms of leadership. I have more than 15 years of experience, like Richard had said, cuts across. The bulk of my experience was spent in the financial markets, about 6 of them in the capital markets, then another 5 in the banking sector. Obviously that then just helped me to step up and pick up other leadership positions. So yeah, today we are talking about the telltale signs that would indicate to you that from where you sit, you don't need to continue sitting pretty, but you need to look ahead and plan for the future. Again, like I said, it's a privilege to be here. But one of the things that I also want to be very clear on, there's no monopoly of knowledge. So I'm also here to learn from the many experiences we are going to share. So this is going to be very interactive. I know in this forum we have Gen X, we might have a few baby boomers, we have millennials, and obviously we have Gen Zs. One of the things that we've learned in the last 2 to 3 weeks is that no one has a monopoly of information, and Gen Zs have taught us so many things. So I'm also here to learn from you guys, even as we discuss the topic that is at hand. So maybe just with do my opening remarks, someone would ask you, when is a good time for you to leave an organization? There's no good time, really. It's all about the goals that you've set out. Then maybe someone can also ask you, is it normal to leave an organization? And I've had this question from a couple of people that I interact with, because they'd be like, look, this employer has been there for me for the last 5, 6 years. There's a new offer that I've been given, and I'm feeling a bit guilty, like I'm letting down my current employer. So is it normal to leave an organization? And one of the things that I keep telling people, think of your current job as a relationship or a contract. Everything has its own times and seasons. One of the things that you need to ask yourself is, are you still serving your purpose? Then you also need to flip that question around and ask, is the organization serving the purpose that you look up to it in terms of meeting your expectations? Obviously, an employment contract is a give and take. They give you a contract because they need your expertise. You have a set of skills they were looking for. That's why they gave you that contract. In return, there are certain deliverables that they expect you to execute. And in return, then they need to compensate you for your skills, for your time, and for anything else that you put into that organization. Reason why I said look at it as times and seasons, it gets to a point and you could feel like now you want to do something different. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So it's very normal for you to leave an organization. I think that just needed to be clear to demystify some of the questions that people have whenever an opportunity comes up and you're thinking, should I or should I not? So it's absolutely normal for you to leave your organization. Again, one of the things that makes it very normal to leave an organization, times have changed. Loyalty doesn't pay bills. At the same time, perceptions have evolved over time. If you think of the days of our parents, I'll give an example, and I would want any one of you to also volunteer to tell us. My dad, who was our breadwinner for the longest time, he worked for 2 organizations in a span of, he was employed for close to 40 years. During that time, he only worked for 2 organizations. And the reason why he worked for 2 organizations is because he was in the private sector. If you flip that aside and look at the guys who are in the public sector, if your mom was a teacher or a nurse, they probably worked for TSC for the 40 years that they existed. If you flip that aside, if you flip it and look at the current situation, I'll give an example of Gen Zs. I know one who is currently holding 3 jobs, 2 online and 1 where we call them what, you have to go to the office, but then he has negotiated in such a way that he only goes to the office 3 times a week. Okay, so this is someone who is currently holding 3 jobs at a go, compared to our parents who held 1 or 2 jobs for more than 40 years. So clearly, perceptions have evolved over time. And again, loyalty doesn't pay bills. Having said that, then it's just very okay for you to leave an organization without having to feel that you are maybe letting someone down. I'll pause there and maybe hear 1 or 2 other experiences. I'd like one of you to tell us about their parents. We'll excuse Gen Zs. For those ones, you might have a parent who's already holding 3 jobs, and maybe you're picking from that. Let's hear the millennials. You can give us an example of maybe the journey of your folks and compare it to yourself currently. How many jobs have you held since you started working? Anyone who is ready to share that experience with us? Richard, you can coordinate that.
Yeah. Let us hear your experiences from yourself and your parents or somebody you know, an aunt, an uncle, who has shaped your perceptions in terms of jobs, in terms of career development. This is where we bring our experiences so that we can elevate and enrich our conversation. So you can just unmute and tell us something. Lorna, Winnie, Monica, don't fear saying something. The 19 others, or you, my friend, you can come up and tell us your experience. Mary, you are welcome. Martin, as we wait for them to process whether they should participate in that question, we can be proceeding.
Thank you, Richard. Probably next time you will randomly pick 1 or 2 people who are scared of volunteering themselves.
Yes, yeah.
So we've already tackled one of the quick questions that people struggle with. Is it normal to leave an organization? And from what I've just told you, it's absolutely normal. I probably gave an example of my dad. I could give an example of myself currently. I've been working for close to 15 years. But can you imagine during that time, I have worked for 1, 2, 3, 4. I've worked for close to 7 organizations. Interesting. I was just looking at, I didn't look at my CV. I just did some brief notes, because there are those people you work for like 3 months. Those ones you don't even put them on the CV. But what I'm trying to say is, in 20 years, I've hit about 6 to 7 organizations. And is that normal? During the time of our parents, in fact, that will sound like an abomination. But in the current day and stage where we have different perceptions, then that is absolutely normal. So we've already covered, is it normal to leave an organization? We could also quickly look at, is there a right time to leave an organization? So one of the statements that I was told, and I hold it very dear myself. I was told that your current job is not your destiny. It is only part of your destiny. So where you are today, don't look at it as your destiny. Whether you're an employee or you're an entrepreneur, and I'm going to explain that. What you're doing today is only part of your destiny. You could actually just take a moment to think of your very first role, then count the milestones you've covered up to where you are today. That should cement the fact that your current position is not your destiny, but it's part of your destiny. Now, whether you're an employer, employee, entrepreneur, that statement applies. I'll tell you why. Let's look at Mark Zuckerberg. He founded Facebook almost over 20 years ago, I remember. If he looked at Facebook as his destiny, there would be no company called Meta today. Meta is the holding company for Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Threads. He continued dreaming big, and he continued reaching for better and bigger. And that's why he was able to come up with, a bigger vision. And I can tell you for a fact, he's not done acquiring other startups. The next time he'll see something that is coming up and is going to be the next big thing, I'm quite sure that he's going to acquire it. So what I'm trying to say, if you stop dreaming and settle where you are today, can you imagine how many unfulfilled dreams you'll be killing? Think of Mark Zuckerberg if he had stopped at Facebook. I don't think, and the good thing about him, whenever he acquires a smaller brand, he actually invests in it to make it a superior brand. So can you imagine where it would be? Like nowadays, most of us don't even text. We tell our friends, umeingia WhatsApp, because that has become our default channel of communication. But it was born out of someone who didn't think of their positions then as their destiny, but they thought of it as a stop or part of the bigger picture in terms of where they're supposed to go. So is there a right time to leave an organization? The matter of right time, again, is a matrix of very many factors, but maybe just to mention a few, because the right time can be determined by chance, okay? Luck, you could be in the right place at the right time for you to get that move. But then it could also be determined by personal drive, circumstances, and finally opportunities. I say this because even in our current organizations, there are people who can easily, when you look at them, you see a definition of luck, okay? Luck as in bahati. There are people in your organization who are simply lucky. Maybe they came in as an intern. They did one or two good things. They were spotted. Maybe they were given a customer service role. Within a short time, there was an internal vacancy and they were elevated to that position. Some of that could be a combination of luck and chance. You could have been there, you've been working all these years and you're wondering what exactly is wrong with me. Because I've had the privilege of being in leadership. Sometimes it is the thing that you will say at the right time that will make you get noticed. It's not the many hours of work that you will put in. That's why we talk about working smart and working hard. So there's an element of luck, chance. If you talk about personal drive, I'm sure we all have our friends who are very driven, like when they put their mind to something and they say, I have to work. Maybe today he's an accountant and he says, in the next 2 years, I have to be the financial controller. He will set out a roadmap in terms of what he needs to do what qualifications he needs to add to himself. And within the 2 years, he'll have ticked those things. So whether the opportunity arises internally or externally, he will be well equipped for that. That's what I mean by personal drive. Circumstances, again, right place, right time. I usually like using one of the corporate leaders, Polycarp Igathe. He's one of the guys who never stays out of employment. Within a very short time, when he leaves one organization, he'll already have gotten another one. That has been a combination of circumstances, but also he has built his brand for people to know that, he's a corporate leader. And also, finally, opportunities. If you don't look out for opportunities, you will actually not know that they exist. So that's why I tell people, if you are in that phase of trying to leave an organization, then you have to look out for opportunities. Having said that, I would, again, maybe just take it back to you, Richard. I'm still keen to hear some reactions on the first point about, is it normal to leave an organization? We wanted to hear one or two, real life experiences. So back to you.
Very good. Thank you, Martin. I have liked the point of personal drive. We will come there. What constitutes personal drive? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our conversation. The question that the presenters asked, is it normal to leave an organization? And he has made a very interesting quote. You should patent it, by the way, Martin, that loyalty does not pay bills. So, ladies and gentlemen, is it normal to leave organizations? Is it normal to leave your current organization? Somebody can volunteer and tell us whether it is normal or abnormal. How long should you stay there? And what are the reasons will make you stay there, or what are the reasons that will make you not stay there? You can take the mic. This is where now you train yourself in public speaking. Karibu, karibu, chukua mic.
Richard, we have some chats.
Oh, chat, let me see. Patricia, my mom works for TSA, has worked for TSA since 1990. I worked for an organization for 3 years, plus reached a plateau and quit. Yeah, that is the Gen Z for you. They keep moving. They don't joke around. Then I'm currently a customer service agent. I've worked for 3 organizations. So far, just graduated in 2018. My mom has worked for one private NGO for 20 years. Wow, that is Veronica. She has worked for several organizations, yet the mom has worked for one single NGO for the last 20 years. Wow, there's a lot of learning. Looks, there's a lot of movement, mobility. There's a lot of mobility there. Yes, somebody can pick the mic and say something. Perhaps at some point, Patricia, you'll tell us what has made you to quit. Is it because you're bored? Is it because you're not challenged? We'll come to that point. Veronica, what informs your movement? You can open the mic. You can take the mic and tell us what informs your movement. What is
Richard,
the difference?
Richard, I see Martha has raised her hand. Maybe we can give her an opportunity.
Martha, you can say something. Come and say something.
Oh, okay. Am I clear?
Very clear, very clear.
Okay. Thank you, Martin and Richard, for this opportunity. For me, I want to go with this, that it is normal to leave the organization. Why am I saying so? I'm saying so because I've been in an organization where I worked for 9 years. So at some points I resigned, but I was being convinced they were seeing the need for me in the company, and they add me a salary, then nikaona, let me stay. Now when it comes that I want to leave, things it forced me to resign that job because of the toxicity of the organization. For me, and say when you think it's a time for you to leave, just leave. Don't be convinced. Because up to now they were saying without me the organization cannot run. But I left and the organization is still growing. That's it.
Oh, you're done, Martha? John said that the father has, or rather, the father worked for an organization for 30 years. She has worked for 5 organizations. 5 organizations for the last 30 years. That is also quite some movement there. Somebody else who can be able to say something? Martin, I don't know if that is sufficient for us to move.
We have Frank.
Frank, Matthew, you can say something as well. Frank, the floor is yours as we.
Sorry. Are you getting me clearly?
Yeah, yes, you're very clear.
Thank you very much, Richard and Martin, for this opportunity. I would like to say that leaving a company is very normal, and yes, it depends with a lot of circumstances. The company may be toxic, and also the goals that you have on your to-do list, on your career, and what you're planning in relation to your life and your path. I can say I've worked for 4 companies in the past 6 years, and some companies it was due to unforeseen circumstances. One was due to the COVID season. They had to retrench some employees, and unfortunately, I was one of them. And for another, it was more about the long-term goals, whereby you see you cannot work for a company for more than 10 years, and you are still the same way you were before. That you have not moved in regards to your career growth, and in relation to how they treat you as a casual laborer more than someone like a partner, or someone like who is there to grow the company and also grow yourself. So it is normal to leave a company. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank, for those very wonderful insights that you have given us, that career plans, career goals, if the culture is not well suited for your growth, if they don't treat you well, are some of the reasons why you could want to jump ship. Over to you, Martin, unless we have somebody who has something to say. Let me see if somebody has written something. Yes, we have Mweni saying no one is irreplaceable, also known as employee never take a counter offer if it is quitting. Yes, that is a very important point. Should we take a counter offer when we are given when we want to quit? That is something that Martin should help us understand. Should we take a counter offer when we want to quit? Donna Murunga, I've worked with 5 companies for the last 8 years. Wow. It means I'm currently looking for an exit due to the lack of challenge. This makes me feel underutilized. Yes, sometimes when we are underutilized, our potential is not being used very well. That could be a reason for us to jump ship. Joan Wanyoke is saying challenges for living is you search for a new job, but the remuneration is not better than where it was. So I have decided to upgrade my skills and search for a better job. Over to you, Martin Wafula.
Thank you, Richard. I like the feedback that is coming in through the chats. So one of them that has just made my eyes pop is when Joanne said, challenges for living, searching for a new job, but maybe, the remuneration is like for like in terms of where you are versus the opportunity you've gotten. So you ask yourself, why should I move for a paltry 2,000 or 3,000? Because again, you need a solid enough reason for you to make a move. So I like the fact that, you've taken a new strategy whereby you now don't just look for like, you upgrade your skills so that you elevate yourself to now look for the job that is in the next band in terms of grading. That's very brilliant. Like I said, we are here to learn from each other. That's very powerful, if you ask me. And for all of us who are probably in a situation whereby the job has, I call it flatlined, okay? Like you feel like you've given as much, but you're not seeing any tangible progress. You might want to change tact and upgrade yourself, which will then in turn help to upgrade your pocket after that. So yeah, that's very powerful for all of us who are on this on this platform right now. Someone mentioned about counter offers. Now, this is my opinion. Of course, it's subject to being critiqued. Nowadays, we can critique everyone. For those of you who saw yesterday Twitter Spaces, some guy decided to call our president Baba Chalin, and I was like, okay. So, I mean, we are allowed to give very objective feedback. From where I sit, I always look at counter offers as very sinister motives to hold on to you because you've caught the other person flat-footed and they're thinking, okay, if this person leaves now, I'm going to be very exposed. So they'll give you a counter. They might try to match whatever you're going to get on the other side. However, ask yourself, what is the possibility of that offer being sustained in the long run? If someone was not able to pay you that while you're still there, but someone else has actually realized that your talent is worth X amount of money, then you're likely to shoot yourself in the foot by taking the counter. In most cases, what I've seen, most people who are given counters, what happens, 6 months down the line, a story can be created because by then, there's a possibility they'll have indirectly made you train someone to take up your job. So I'm always, there's someone who said, never take a counter offer. That was Moeni. Again, I fully agree with you on that. However, there are few companies who can genuinely break the bank for you, but also look at the organization you're working for. If it's not Google and the big brands who can make an executive decision to create a budget for you, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. So again, just look at all the pros and the cons. At the very last resort is when you should consider a counter. But most of the times, please do not. That's my opinion. We could move on to the next thing I wanted us to look at. So maybe before I move on, just back on that point of is there a right time to leave an organization? I had pointed out that look at your current job as part of your destiny. Never sit on your potential, because again, we are capable of achieving very many big dreams. Yeah.
Martin, are you still there? Martin,
Sorry, I'm back. I was just sorting something small. So on the point of, is there a right time to leave an organization? Again, I just wanted to leave a parting shot to all of us, that look at where you are right now as part of your destiny. Never ever settle there in terms of your goals, because what you're going to do, you're likely to kill your dreams. And whether you're an entrepreneur, again, I know on this platform, not all of us are employed. And even for those of us who are employed, we are likely to have side hustles that we are running with. Now, can you think of that side hustle? You think of it as your destiny today. I'll give an example. If today you're in the business of importing shoes from China, okay? Very brilliant idea. But if you think of it as your destiny, you're gonna kill your bigger dream of, you can easily turn that into a full-blown boutique. From not just doing shoes, but tomorrow you're likely to bring in suits, dresses, and all the other things. So the parting shot before we move away from that point is never ever settle where you are. Keep upgrading yourself, keep working on yourself. And that's when you talked about personal drive. Keep upgrading yourself so that you don't kill the dreams that you're sitting on. The third thing I wanted us to look at as we move towards the telltale signs of an organization, what factors should one consider before making such a decision? So what I look at is, by the time you're gonna get to making a decision where you want to quit an organization, it means you have all the reasons. Like I said, we now look at the telltale signs. But what else should you consider before making that decision? There are certain, for me, I look at 3 things that are critical. One of them is timelines. The next one is pipeline, and also exposure. So in terms of timeline, certain jobs take a longer time, to come across, even to just come across a vacancy of a certain type, it could take longer than other jobs. Practical example here, if you're in the sales department, every day you're likely to come across someone looking for a sales executive, business development executive, BDM, commercial manager. Those ones, they are easy to come across, but also remember, they're easy to come across because the turnover is very high, okay? So certain jobs are easy to come by, but other jobs, they take longer. I like using a very bad example. We all know who a mortician is, okay? The guys who work in the morgues, in the mortuaries. Those guys, they have seen everything in life. The good, the bad, the ugly, they have seen it all. So when it comes to changing jobs, they hardly change jobs, okay? So if you're in that profession, please know that the turnover is not as high as a sales rep. And there are many other examples we can think of. But I like using that very extreme example to tell people that the skill set that you have, the industry that you are in, differs from one person to another. On average, it's gonna take you 6 months to 18 months based on the industry, the job itself, and the level of seniority. If you want to shift from one job to another, on average, it's gonna take you 6 months to 18 months. Having that information with you is very critical, because then it helps you to decide, if I want to make a move by January next year, if there are people who have goals and they're saying, by January, I need a new job. You need to ask yourself, the ease of mobility in your industry, how easy or how hard it is. If it's very hard and you want to make a move in January, you might as well start looking around in January 2024. Don't wait for October 2024 and you want to move in January. So timeline is very critical, but again, like I said, it's based on the level of seniority, the industry itself, and the job that you're doing. The second thing that we needed to look at is pipeline. How often do jobs similar to yours become available? I think I've already covered this briefly when I was talking about the industry and the job role. But then here you just need to know how frequent. If today you visit any of the websites that the job websites, there are certain roles you're likely to come across. They constitute maybe 30%. And most of it would be maybe sales roles in most cases, and it also informs you that every organization is out there looking for people who can help it generate revenues. If you're in a more specialized role, rest assured, they not only take longer to come across, but they are also few and far apart. So yeah, pipeline is very critical for you to notice, for you to take note, sorry. The third point in terms of factors to consider when one is making a decision to jump ship is exposure. And by this, I mean personal exposure based on your obligations. If you're a parent and you're searching for a job, obviously what happens is you have your obligations. Is the current role ticking off all those things? Yes or no? You want a buffer? Yes. The reason I say you need to consider your exposure, for some people, you might have negotiated certain facilities with your current employer, especially those who work in banks and insurance companies. Of course, rule of the thumb is as long as you're working for me, and I say this because I was once in the banking sector. So what such employers say, as long as you're working for me, you can take this loan facility and only pay me 8%. The moment you quit, it goes to the commercial rate, which is maybe 18%, 20%. The reason why such exposures are critical for you to bear in mind is because if you took 100,000 and you've been paying 8%, can you imagine the dent it's gonna put on your payslip when it crosses over to 18%? Now, the moment you consider such exposures, then it helps you to make two decisions. One, do you need to renegotiate some of those terms? So either with whoever gave you the facility, do you need to renegotiate that? And two, how much are you going to ask for in your next role so that it covers the exposure that you're likely to be left dealing with as a result of changing that job? So those factors are critical for us to consider whenever we are looking at, just making that move. Again, Richard, how I prefer is taking a pause and getting maybe feedback through the chats, or anyone who has something to add before we proceed.
Yeah, those are very good points. Those are very valid points. When you want to make a move, you should check your exposure. You should check the loans you have. You should check so many things in relation to your exposure so that you can be able to make a more intelligent decision. Also, we should look at the pipeline. Ladies and gentlemen, we encourage participation. If you have got something to add onto what Martin has said, what are the considerations? What are the considerations when you want to move to a different jobs? You can share your views either by writing or by taking the mic and saying something. Irene Msevi, living is important for skill set growth. You can't grow your skills and widen your experience if you work for one organization. So when you want to move, it is important to think of the skills that you want to acquire in a different organization, because most probably the organization you're working right now does not provide new challenges in terms of providing new skill sets. It is the same old thing that you've been doing for the last many years. So if you are very interested in, yes, Innocent, you're welcome. I can see your hand up. You can take the mic.
Okay, before you move to another organization, you have to make sure, you have to check the sustainability of that organization, if it can sustain you for a while, rather than moving from a sustainable company to a company that is crippling. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you very much. Regina Waidera is asking, is poor working environment a good reason to leave a job? I will let that be handled by Martin. Is it a good reason to leave if there is a poor working? Probably you have a poor relationship with the head of department or some other powerful person within the organization. Is it a good reason for you to leave? Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. There was also feedback from Joanne, but I see it's been handled by the client support. She wanted some links for online jobs that are genuine. I believe, Richard, this falls within Denidel because you guys are a recruiting firm. So yeah, just pick that up and assist her on the same. Monica has said organization culture is important to consider before moving. Fully agree with this. I'm sure many people who are on this call have stories to tell whereby you saw a better payslip, you jumped at it, but then you're jumping into a very, very toxic culture in terms of the other environment. So those are some of the things that, culture is very critical in terms of just knowing. And these are some of the things, like I said, the reason why I mentioned timeline as one of the things to consider. If you're giving yourself 6 months to 1 year to engineer your exit, that is also ample time to do a bit of research on the companies that you're interviewing at, okay? So that you're able to pick out what's the culture in there and how does it align with what you believe in. Again, like I said, the last 2 weeks have been very interesting. I remember one of the MPs called KJ when he was saying some of those pictures, the photos he saw are not for Gen Zs. They were picked from the internet and people discredited him because he was lying. So one of the things I picked out is not the lie that he said, but there's something he said which is very important to all of us. He said every photo has a digital footprint. Now, this is not just for every photo. This is for every post, every comment that has been made about a certain organization, or any link that a blogger has written about that company. So during your 6 months to 1 year, in terms of your timeline to engineer your exit, take advantage of the digital footprint to find out what are people saying online about this organization. How do they treat their employees? How is the culture in there? Some organizations are very closed in terms of they might not even have they might have a website, but their social media pages are not active. You will not pick a lot from their official pages. You'll pick a lot based on what other people are saying. So again, I was just trying to emphasize the culture point that Monica pointed out. Use the digital footprint for you to be able to pick what people are saying about that organization. And that marries into what Innocent has said, whereby, you don't want to move from a stable company into one that is sinking. Or you might think where you are, you're sinking, then you jump and you're getting into an organization that already sunk. The only thing you saw is maybe the red flag. They were trying to ask for help. So yeah, it's critical to try and know about the culture on the other side. Regina asked, is poor working environment a good reason to leave a job? Absolutely. Just the same way culture is a good enough reason for you to leave an organization, working environment is a good reason for you to leave a job. I'll say this because I've seen a few people who, how do I put it? You think you're enjoying your job until one day you try waking up and you're literally burnt out. Okay. And this happens in the operational roles where you're giving your many hours every day to the level that maybe it becomes the norm. Your employer is used to seeing you in the office by 7 and you're the last person to leave. To you, you're thinking it's loyalty, but you're basically punishing your body. Now, if you get to a realization and you're like, okay, look, I can't do this anymore, that's good enough reason for you to leave. There are so many other factors that can make the working environment not good enough for you, and that is enough reason for you to leave a job. Veronica has asked, can someone leave? Can you leave a job if you don't have another one? Yes, if you are the son or daughter of the president, you can do that. To the rest of us, that should literally be the last resort. Again, we talk about personal health, personal security being a priority, which is very, very okay. But also remember, we are in a third world country, we're in a developing country where there'll always be obligations, not even yours alone. You have siblings, you have cousins who are always looking up to you. So if you have to leave a job when you don't have another one, let that be the last resort. To avoid a situation like that, what you need to do is whenever you see certain signs, and sometimes, you can be at an organization and you start feeling, you know what, I need change. The moment that feeling gets into your mind, then now give yourself timelines. The 6 months to 1 year that I've given will obviously help you to avoid a situation whereby you're stepping out without having another place to go. One of the other reasons why I also don't advocate for this, like I said, unless it's your last resort, I sit in interview panels and, people walk in and you're like, okay, so you've been working at this point. I see you worked here until last year, September. Then you left and maybe you've been out for another 6-7 months. Some people are quick enough to explain the gaps very well. For others, it becomes I call it, sometimes it becomes the deal breaker. Again, depending on the panel, there are people who are lenient on such, but others will frown at it. Obviously, times are changing. In developed countries, I've seen some executives, even on their LinkedIn, they say, I've taken 6 months off. I've gone to look after my baby. There was maternity and all that, so they have taken 6 months. Totally understandable in the developed countries. Where we sit currently, we are still working towards that. And when you see, there are certain companies that are trying to embrace that, but most of them are multinationals. The EABLs, the Diageos, the Google, whereby employees can take a break. So those are conversations that we are still trying to get into, but currently I would not advise, let that be your last resort. Like, for you to leave a job when you don't have another, let it be your last resort.
There is a question by Mweni. When you encounter very bad practices during the interview, would that be the reason inform you not to take that job? For example, what was your pay in the last job?
Yeah, I've seen it. So, and it already, I think I've answered part of it in my previous comment, whereby, like I said, where we sit vis-a-vis developed countries, people take certain feedback differently. I've seen people in the developed countries taking 13 months break just to, I've seen even some people actually take a break to travel. I remember one of my previous bosses, before he switched to his current job, he took 6 months, and he said during the 6 months, one of the things he wanted to do was to train and climb Mount Kenya. Totally understandable. When that trickles down to our current settings, then some of these things also become difficult conversations in interviews. And it's a very uncomfortable space. And I understand where Mweni is coming from, where if someone is asking you how much was your last pay, you are changing jobs very frequently. Are you a flight risk? And those are very critical questions from any HR practitioner. Our GM for HR, whenever we are having interviews, one of the things that she asks people who've not held jobs for more than 6 months, she would be like, so let's assume it's Richard. She's like, Richard, from your trend, it looks like in the next 6 months, I'll still be seated here trying to hire someone to fill your position. So sometimes they ask those questions because they want to know that this is not going to be a revolving door, okay? So they don't ask it in bad faith. But again, what I can say in the interviews, and there are questions that have been asked before, and I just said, guys, I am not comfortable answering that question in this setting. If you want me to answer it, put it on email, something like that. So even in the interviews, if you're not comfortable answering something, just feel free to let the panel know you're not comfortable talking about it. Anything else, Richard, that you've picked out?
Yeah, there is job security. That is Winnie Rogendo. Job security, especially for organizations that give you very short contracts that keep them. Is that a reason for you to leave when you're being given very? For example, I can see organizations give 6 months, 1 year. Is that a good reason for you to say no? That is enough.
It is also a telltale sign. It's probably one of the things we were to look at today. One of the reasons why certain organizations decide to give short-term contracts is to avoid the long-term obligations, okay? Once I confirm you into employment, I have to look at your pension. I probably have to look at your medical and so many other obligations. And those ones, they basically increase the employee cost. Now, some organizations then have decided to be clever by giving short-term contracts. Is it a good thing for the employee? If you ask me, no. Why? If today I want to access a bank facility for whatever reason, of course, they're going to ask you for a letter from your employer. The moment they realize you're on the short-term contract, they don't even look at you twice. So is that good enough for you to leave your current job? Of course, if someone is willing to give you a long-term contract, then definitely that's good enough reason for you to leave. And also, like I've just explained, to avoid the short stints on your CV, then when those better solid offers come, yes, you are allowed to leave.
There's a question an observation by John. John is saying that he was given very good pay in a certain organization, but he started noticing certain very telltale signs that this is not an organization to work. So the pay is high, but the environment. So comment about somebody's mental wellness and being paid highly in that line of living work that even that is paying you very well, but the mental wellness issue becomes a problem.
Agree with that. Like I had already pointed out before, there are certain organizations there are certain circumstances, and I gave an example of someone who could be an accountant working for the longest up to 7 p.m., then one day you suffer from burnout. Is that equivalent to the fat paycheck you're being given? So that's one example. The second example, you can get into an organization like the one now John is talking about, very good paycheck. Then you realize maybe the CEO is the type who shouts at people, they demean you, they say all the mean things about you, about their staff. Obviously, with continuous bashing, what that does, it dents your self-confidence. Is that something that can make up for your fat paycheck? Probably not. Now, obviously, we move mainly because we want to improve our welfare, and that includes getting a better pay. But again, culture, like it was mentioned by Monica up there, culture is very important in terms of the company you're going to. And again, I will emphasize digital footprint. Look out for all the red flags about that organization before you even decide to take up the offer. Because like I said, you'll get a big paycheck, but you're going to sweat, you're going to give sweat and blood to get that money. And at the end of the day, what I've also noticed sometimes, some of these high pressure jobs, like now the one John is talking about, it takes a toll on you in other aspects of your life, whether it's family, whether it's just giving back to society. You realize that you're suffering on those other ends. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much. Martha has asked a question that I know is on people's minds. The question of delayed pay, you're getting paid on the 11th, you're getting paid on the 7th, you'll be getting paid on the 5th, you're getting... Should this be a good reason for you to leave? I'm sure this is completely in people's minds. Tell us something about it. When there is inconsistency, at what time you are supposed to be paid your pay?
Actually, when that happens, it's already too late. You should have left earlier. And I'll tell you why that is not even the telltale signs. By the time that happens, there's a lot that has gone on in the back end. So by the time she's asking, is it right to leave the organization because the company is unable to pay salaries for the past 3 months? Absolutely yes. But again, I'll cover this as we move along. Just wondering, is there any of the chat that we have not? Maybe Richard, what you can do is
Monica.
Martin, maybe
Yes.
a contribution in
Go ahead.
terms of there are certain little things that you might not notice, but they give a lot of insight about an organization. I'll give you an example. Let's say you are chatting with maybe the CEO of a certain company about the possibility of joining the organization, and you realize that let's say your WhatsApp chat, they've put on disappearing messages after 90 days. That should tell you quite a lot about the individual you're dealing with, because it shouts out that this is someone who is not trustworthy. Then certain agreements that you may go into. So let's say I'm paid, let's say 300K in the current organization I'm in, but the organization you're joining, they can't afford you, but they give you like certain arrangement of a commission. So they tell you, let's give you 250, and then the rest you'll get it in commission basis. So such arrangements, especially, and if you factor in, there is no paperwork involved, as in nothing written, then those are some of the things that you need to really focus on while making such a decision. And when you are in an interview and you find such red flags, the truth is I would always prefer not to go ahead with such an arrangement, especially if you look at the signs that are around the interview. Even the attitude of the interviewers will tell you a lot. If someone has an issue with you maybe let's say you've come in with long hair, maybe dreadlocks. I would think that is, yes, it's dependent on the industry and everything, but that would be such a small aspect of it that shouldn't inform the entire of your performance in that interview. So if someone is petty enough to have a big deal in terms of how you are groomed, then you'd tend to wonder what kind of culture this organization has at the end. So there are so many, in summary, there are so many things around the interview process of getting into the organization, and also when you're already in. Maybe the last thing I would also want to look at is networking. We normally say networking is very good, and this is an example. There's a friend of mine who wanted to join a former organization I worked for. And because we went to school way back, like 10 years ago together, they just reached out and told me, okay, there's this organization. I know you were there. How is it like? And they had already gone for 2 interviews. They were just at point of accepting the job. So I told them, oh, you should have asked me earlier. I can only tell you this because I am your friend. But otherwise, I wouldn't have told, I would have given out such information unless it's someone I felt very obliged to give out such information. So whatever organization they were getting into is basically sinking. The staff have not been paid for a couple of months. But now for him, when you're on in the outside, you can never know. So that's why it's good to network, even if you don't quite have much to talk about, but just know someone somewhere. So if you know, let's say Richard worked for a certain organization, or Richard is a recruiter and may know certain things in the industry, you just do your background check so that you're not in a mess. You're not in a mess. Yeah, that is it from my end, Martin.
Thank you, Hosea, for the contributions. Part of what you've said answers what Monica was asking. What red flags should I look for as an interviewee? If you've gotten to that level whereby maybe you're conversing with the key decision maker, it could be the CEO or the HR or whoever it is, and they're having the disappearing messages, I mean, that's a red flag. But then also as an interviewee, like we've said severally, just look within your network. If there's anyone who has worked for that organization, try to pick that feedback. And also just go through the digital footprint. You're always going to find something that has been said about that organization. Those are some of the things that will help you to put together and see whether whatever you're collecting are red flags or white flags. Then it will help you make a decision. However, also as an interviewee, certain things that will inform you the culture is, or the way the organization does things is not very okay. Things to do with turnaround times. If someone promised you, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, and 2 months down later, 2 months down the line, no one is saying anything to you. Those are just telltale signs that that's not the right organization you want to join. So turnaround times, how they, one of the things that can easily tell you whether that's the organization, when you ask them questions, that's the way they respond to those questions during the interviews. Again, it will tell you whether this is an open door policy culture, or these are guys who are also very scared of their boss, things like those. So the red flags will be based on the digital footprint that you'll have picked, and also the feedback that you'll have gotten from people who work there. Is it a setup? This is Mweni, who is asking about certain organizations somehow pressurize you into joining them. They're even willing to pay for your notice period. Again, Tricky question. Some organizations would genuinely want to pay for your notice period because they need your skill set on board. Maybe it was in the middle of an ongoing project, and for it to be successfully executed, they need a certain skill set. That way, they are likely to adjust their budget to bring you on board as quickly as possible. Those are very few exceptions. If you notice there is undue pressure from the other side, then also I usually say be firm and fair. Tell guys, you're like, you know what, in as much as I'm joining you, I am not in the business of burning bridges. So could you just allow me to go through the due process? Let me serve notice, let me hand over properly, then we see how we can work together. Because remember what I said before, your current job is not your destiny. It is part of your destiny. So would you want to burn bridges where you are because someone wants to pay off the notice period? Yeah, so that's what I can say there.
Martin, I would want you to contribute on leadership as one of the indicators of why a person should want to leave an organization. What kind of leadership would you expect to have in an organization? And if you have the opposite, then it gives you the red flags for you to change to where you are appreciated better.
So a company is as good as the people. You know, we look at other pillars and forget the one that matters the most. People look at the processes, people look at profitability, but you know, all those things are only good as the people you have on board. And obviously, when you talk of people, there's always the person who is holding the vision at the top. Now, we have different leaders with different leadership styles. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What is critical is your leadership style bringing people together to get the work done? If it's doing the opposite, then rest assured, people will leave. And sometimes you can do all the right things, but then people will still leave. But as a leader, then you need to make sure that there's this vision that we are working towards, have clarity of communication, make sure that vision has been communicated to your team. Then I usually say a good leader is the one who works with people and through people. The moment you get that mix right, then you'll have no problem retaining people. But if you don't get that right, then obviously you'll start losing your people. So in terms of leadership, what I usually believe in is have clarity of communication. This is the vision. This is how I see us getting there. This is your contribution as Richard. This is your contribution as Anne. This is Frank. This is what is expected of each one of you. This is the support I'm going to give. Now, let's go. Failure to all that, then obviously there'll always be struggles. I don't know if I've answered that, Richard.
Yes, you have. There's another one which is related to when you have difficulties even getting out of your bed, you're detached from your work, you don't feel like going to work. Can that really be a basis for you to leave? You are detached. Even we are told that you should find something that makes you jump out of bed. If you're not jumping out of bed, should that be a good reason for you to leave that organization or a job? Maybe
So,
change career.
So your current job might not be good enough reason to make you jump out of bed, but your bills will actually force you to jump out of bed. So what you need to do is, if you realize your current job is not motivating you enough to get out of bed in the morning, then start working on, remember the things I pointed out: timeline, pipeline, and exposure. Okay? So the moment you realize your job is no longer exciting you enough, jump out of bed. As the bills push you out of bed, draw up some sort of a, some roadmap towards, I want to be out of here by this time. That way, as you keep forcing yourself to jump out of bed, you are also working on exiting from whatever is not adding value to you. And like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with people changing jobs, times and seasons. Maybe whatever you are to achieve at that point has been done, and you're feeling like your energy is either fully spent or you have so much energy that, like you have a Ferrari and you're in traffic. You want to drive, but you're moving at 40 kph. So again, if your job is not motivating you enough to jump out of bed, pipeline should be your next thing.
One is asking, assuming you were working for an organization with high attrition rates, yes, attrition rates. I think you had commented on it. Attrition rates could be a very good indicator that the organization is not doing well. That was answered, John. Attrition rates, that there are reasons why. What is the recommended attrition rate? We have a recommended attrition rates that it is normal for people to leave, but this attrition rate is too much. Do we have some science behind, managerial science behind attrition rates, Martin?
Attrition rate is relative to the roles you're holding. In my previous role, my salespeople kept leaving after every 6 months. But when I deep dived, I realized our product was hard to sell. It was difficult to sell. So if a product is hard to sell, the attrition will be very high because people will come, they'll try, they realize, no, it's not working for me, they'll go. So for commercial functions, attrition rate is higher. For operational, it's medium, but at the same time, other factors check in. It could be medium, but if you're overworking your team, attrition will move from medium to high. Okay. What we've noticed nowadays, everyone is an advocate of mental health and work-life balance. So clearly, the operation could easily move from medium to high if you as a leader, you're not factoring in all those other things. So it's neither here nor there. And like I also said, think of your CV in terms of, those gaps that you're likely to have. In the interest of time, I would request that we move into the telltale red flags.
Okay,
Richard?
let us continue. Yes, you're right. Let's go into.
So we are to look at company performance as a deal breaker for one's exit. What are some of the red flags that you need to look out for so that you make that decision? I usually call it flight versus fight. So flight is where you decide, you know what, I'm not staying in this organization, I'm leaving. Fight decision is where you say, okay, things are bad, but I'm going to stay behind and, try and make it work. So quickly, a company performance could be looked at as the ability of an organization to implement a strategy to achieve what they have set out as their objectives. This is generally we're looking at how well does this company accomplish its goals. Now, from the overall perspective, a company's goals could fall into strategic, financial, and operational. For an employee, we are always keen to look at the financial aspect. But even if you look at the strategic goals or the operational goals, they are likely to give you hints whether your company is steady or it's actually struggling. Strategic goals will be the ability to just execute the vision, mission statement. How good is your brand with the stakeholders? Like where I work currently, some of our key stakeholders is Kenya Revenue Authority. We have Kenya Ports Authority. and Kenya Railways. So those are key stakeholders. Are we in good standing with the stakeholders? You also look at what are the footprints of your organization. Do they just have a single shop in town, or are they expanding into other counties or other countries? Those are strategic goals. Financial goals would be the ability of a company to generate revenues using the resources that are on board. One of the resources is you yourself as an employee. Operational goals will be the effectiveness in terms of how we are serving our customers, cultural alignment, and also compliance. So most of us will just zero in on the financial performance of a company. But like I've said, if you look at strategic, financial, and operational, you are easily likely to pick out the red flags before. Unfortunately, very few of us, if you were to ask the 30 plus people on this platform, how many of us work for the listed companies, the companies that are on the Nairobi Securities Exchange? Very few of us. Most of us are probably working for tier 2, tier 3, self-employed, etc. As a result, it becomes hard for you to come across, information on the financial performance of your company. I like giving a very funny example. One of the companies I used to work for back then in 2012, whenever we could see the HR manager and the finance manager going into the MD's office, we knew there was a problem. Okay. And for most of organizations, maybe that is how we know there's a problem. When you see those three seated together, you know maybe someone is going home. But then I call that structural deficiency. It makes it hard for a common employee to access critical information. But we see what Gen Z taught us last week. They summoned the president and he listened to them. So from where we sit, are we in a position where we can also get access to certain critical information? And when I talk of critical information, it's anything that touches on the strategic goals, financial goals, and operational goals. So if I talk of declining company performance, how are you likely to get this information? If you're not in sales, are you able to have visibility on the month-on-month or quarter-on-quarter sales performance versus expenses? Of course, the salespeople are likely to see this information. What about the rest of the team? One of the things that I have made as my personal goals, every quarter, I'll have a sit down with my whole team to tell them this is where we are in terms of performance. That way, it gives visibility in terms of how the company is doing. But in your organization, do you have a platform like that? If you don't have, what I usually say is information is power. You need to probably onboard, and Jose mentioned about networking. You need to make friends with people in those critical departments who can easily tell you what is happening. So how do you spot signs of a declining organizational performance? Someone talked about an organization whereby salaries are being paid on 10th, on 15th, and they were asking, is that a red flag? That is not a red flag. By the time that is happening, I'm telling you this because I'm on the other side of decision making. By the time we are delaying your salary up to 5th, you need to know things are worse than they are supposed to. So by the time you're seeing salary delays, that is the last thing that as a leader you will touch. Because the moment you delay salaries, you're already raising panic in the team. So that's really the last thing. Other things that you as an employee need to look out for. So I just gave a few examples. From a strategic goal deficiency, if you realize the organization keeps shifting the key milestones, okay? So there's the strategy document that we come up with and say, in year 1, you're going to bring in 50 million, year 2, 75, year 3, 100, year 1, you're going to open 5 branches, year 2, XX, like that. If you realize those key milestones are constantly shifting, and constantly shifting not in the progressive way, but retrogressive, then that should give you a reason to be worried. At the bare minimal, if you set out 4 strategic goals for this financial year, at least by the end of the year, make sure you are 50 and above. So make sure you've ticked off 2. But if towards the end of the year, you realize all the 4, none of them has been achieved, you need to start asking yourself questions. Operational deficiency. The moment we keep talking to our customers, committing certain things, but we are not executing them, and this is constantly, then you as an employee need to be worried about that. If we look at cultural alignment, again, I put this under operational. If all of a sudden the culture has just become something else, if before then, for example, if your organization has been very compliant in certain things, but all of a sudden you realize they are cutting shortcuts, that is an operational deficiency. It should immediately give you cause. If we look at the financial deficiency, and this is where most of us focus. So you realize your salary has delayed. That's okay in terms of a red flag, but how did you get there? If you're to dig further, you will realize that maybe something like NHIF was deducted from you, but it was not remitted. It could be employee deductions, whether it's SACCO contributions, whether it's pensions. Your money was deducted, but it was not remitted. Now, by the time we are delaying your salary, those are some of the tricks that could have happened in the background without informing you. As an employee, how do you guard yourself to ensure that you don't get yourself in such surprises? It is within your right to be asking for statements for some of these things, whether it's your SACCO contribution or pension or NHIF. Please make sure that every so often you have this information with you. We are usually told information is power. But for most of us, as long as salary mengia kwa account, we are not so worried about are the other contributions being remitted. So it's very critical for you to make sure you have access to this information. And it's within your right to ask for it. If you have a private pension, again, if HR is not cooperating on that, just reach out to those guys and say, can I see my statement? That way, it will help you to pick out the red flags before waiting to see your salary has been delayed. Like I said, that would be the last thing, because the moment a salary is delayed, it creates panic. So normally, all these other deficiencies would have already taken place. How do you assess your current job versus future prospects? So this is when I talk about fight versus flight. The immediate reaction when you realize this red flags is for you to try and flight, you take off. But remember, it's also a process. We've already mentioned that on average, it takes 6 months to 18 months to land a job. So the moment you decide it's a flight decision, then you need to put all systems in place. I'll also need to mention that for some positions, it's very hard for you to do the flight decision. You have to stick around and fight. Good example is a CEO and a CFO, and those chief commercial officers, those ones, they are harder to flight. Woe unto you if your company is also listed, because then the moment you try to resign, we have NSC and Capital Markets Authority who will try to find out, what are you running away from? Okay, so certain jobs, it's harder to flight. But then again, remember the timeline. it takes 6 to 18 months for that to happen. So those are just some of the things I wanted to mention quickly in terms of the telltale signs and the red flags that we need to look out for as we decide whether we need to move or not. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much. Those are very good points that we should be able to look at the performance of the organization. We should look at operational issues. We should look at cultural alignments, the continuous shifting of milestones, etc., in terms of understanding whether we should make career moves. Now, as we come to the tail end of our discussion, because pretty much we've discussed the signs that are so common, what are some of the strategies we are supposed to deploy once we have accumulated lots of signs of shipping out? What are some of the key strategies are we supposed to put in place so that we ship out once we have accumulated enough, a cluster of signs?
So for that, I'll go back to one of the key points I mentioned. So if you need strategies for making a smooth transition to your next job, if you want it to be smooth, the first thing you need to do is to create timelines. This is critical. Don't do it blindly. It's just like any other thing in your life where you set out goals and you work towards them. We did that in our colleges. We did that in many other aspects of life. It also applies when you're looking for a new job. Set out your goals and work towards them. So timelines are very critical as the first point. The second point is to identify mentors who will guide you both with the decision and at the same time also with the referral mechanisms. Unfortunately, for most of us when we were brought up, we never had the privilege of being told about mentorship. These are things that we are picking along the way. So that means we have work to learn and implement. Of course, our children and the ones who will come after that, they start hearing about mentorship at a very early stage. So where you sit, if you haven't started identifying few people who can mentor you, and this applies, they could be within your line of profession, within your study, and your social gatherings. If you have not identified, please do that. There are the people who will try to speak sense into you. Half of the times we think we are making sense until someone else looks at something and becomes the devil's advocate. So identify mentors, very critical. The third thing, which I will not overemphasize, it was already mentioned, I like calling it social capital. Other people call it networking, I call it social capital. You need to build this over time. I've seen people in their 20s, they come and say, what do you mean by social capital? I mean, I'm barely out of college. I say, fine, you're barely out of college, but how are you planning to gain entry into that industry that you have interest in? Check online, who are these people who are the voices in those industries. Follow them, see what they are saying, see what they are talking about, align yourself to that. Get yourself in forums where you're likely to interact with such people. So you need to build this over time. Like I said, again, on the timeline, if you have 6 months to 1 year to transition, start building those key networks now. Don't wait. If you want to move in January, don't wait for October. Then you start sliding into people's inboxes and telling them, hey, by the way, I'm looking for a job. If you start now, the conversation will be more natural by the time you're expressing that interest. So in terms of strategies for a smooth transition, for me, my key take homes would be have timelines, ensure you have mentors, and thirdly, social capital. It's the only thing that is going to open the next door for you. Richard?
Thank you so much. That has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Unless there's a question because of time, let me see if there's a question that has not been attended to. All right, there's Regina. What if one is tired of repetitive processes? That has been pretty much answered. Talk about staff on state corporations who are taken back to parent ministries and starting all over again to fit in. So that is a question of being taken to the question, the parent ministry, sorry, and they start fitting in. Could that give you enough reasons to move when you are being taken to a new state corporation, then you start fitting in, the culture is different?
Okay.
Have you prepared for your parting shots because of time? Go on, Martin.
I was about to say that question by Regina, where people are taken back to the parent ministries and try to fit in. We can open that to the forum if there's someone who can answer. For me, I've pretty much been in the private sector. Fast-paced, I don't know how it works on the other side. In fact, I think if I went there, I'll be very bored. So someone can easily answer that question.
Somehow you have managed to answer the question by looking at if it's something that excites you, if it is something that is career suicide. There are certain state corporations that become career suicide, and it is good reason for you to do more assessment and audit for you to move to a place. Winnie Rogendo is saying, avoiding to tell people that you want to leave. So you have to be strategic if you want to move out. You have to keep quiet. If you tell people that you want to leave, then you will limit yourself. The word on the ground will reach your head of department, and you will become, for lack of a better word, advocacy. People who are paid but they are not given work until you get tired and then you start moving. So I think it's not very good, wise to be telling anybody that you're leaving, because you do not know who you are talking to. You do not know who goes to the same jumuiya with your boss. You do not know who speaks to who. So if you start opening your mouth to everybody, then you are not a strategist. All right, thank you so much, Martin. Thank you so much, Hosea. So Martin, you can give us your parting shots as we appreciate the wonderful work that Martin has freely given unto us. And as you can see, he has emphasized the role of mentors, and this is good mentorship. Martin, you can be preparing your parting shots.
Richard,
Thanks, Richard. Okay, Hosea, go ahead.
I think there's one request. Grace? Or it was by mistake. Probably it was by mistake. Just go ahead, Martin.
So yeah, thanks, Richard. Thanks, Hosea, for the opportunity once again. I'm always honored to just, share experiences with people, because like I said, we are all here to learn. I've picked very key points from the chats. And yeah, I'm sure we are all better now in terms of information than when we started this forum. So Thank you for the opportunity. Like I said again, where you are today, if there's anything you need to take with you, your current job is not your destiny. It is only part of your destiny. If you ever think of it as your destiny, please remember that we are in a different age. Our parents were okay being at one organization from employment until retirement. We have an opportunity for us to create impact, for us to be the next Mark Zuckerbergs of this world. So whatever it is you're doing in your current dispensation, look at it as an opportunity to create impact, but not your destiny. That way, in a couple of years, then you will be at a totally different trajectory. And you look back and you're like, wow, it is me who's been able to do all that. It's actually possible for you to do that. And I say this again from a point of personal experience. Like I said, I was in the financial markets for close to 12 years. But during all that time, I was basically a salesperson, business development, all that. The moment I took the risk of taking up a new challenge in terms of leadership, it's been probably 4 years, but they've been 4 very fulfilling years because I've been able to impact at scale as compared to by the way, banks are very good products. Huh? I would still be at the bank and getting cheap loans, but I would not be impacting at scale. So always look at your current role as the means to a greater version of you tomorrow. That would be my parting shot. And also remember, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you leaving your current role, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an employee, because again, we are destined for great things. Thank you very much.
Let us appreciate Martin using various emojis. Let us appreciate, because he could be somewhere doing golf, but he had decided to come and share his knowledge. Let us appreciate Martin for creating 1.5 hours to enlighten us on the signs that we should look for when we want to exit a certain stage that has become intolerable. Thank you so much, Martin. God bless you. Danlel Consortium LLB is a consulting firm. We deal with HR consultancy, we deal with technology consultancy, we deal with training, and we also deal with team building. Like yesterday, we had an awesome time with Optimen. The videos are coming out soon. Please recommend us to wherever you hear wants team building, other HR consultancies, and other types of training. Have a good day and God bless you all. Thank you so much. Have a good day.